Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Kirsten Kung. I am going to be doing this presentation along with my colleague, Dr. Sophia Tsaineri. And as you probably just heard, the presentation will be recorded, so you might want to keep that in mind. And therefore, it will be available to you after the presentation. It takes a day or two for it to get processed, so it won't be available immediately, but we will share it with you. So just keep that in mind if there's any items that you want to review.
And hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Sophia Tsaineri. I'm Assistant Director with the Undergraduate Research Hub, and we're happy to have you here at the How to Present Your Research for the Undergraduate Research Conference. Next slide, please. So we will have two parts to today's info session workshop. The first part will be telling you more about how to create and design your slides for the actual presentation. This is an oral presentation. And then part two, we'll talk more about the specific conference itself and learn more about just, what does the day look like? How does it flow? And answer any questions you have. And with that, back to you, Dr. Kang.
Okay, so first we will be talking about formatting and design tips. So these are general tips for any time that you give an oral presentation. Again, the second half will focus specifically on the URC, but there are some things that are helpful to keep in mind whenever you're doing an oral presentation. So if you look at this talk and look at this slide, and when presenting, remember that slides are not the presentation. Slides guide the presentation. You're given the presentation, not reading it. Keep the presentation simple. One way to do this is to use bullet points. All right, so that may have been a little bit hard for you to hear. The slide may be a little bit difficult for you to see. And that was kind of an example of things that often happen with an oral presentation, but that really should be avoided if at all possible. I'm going to move from this slide because this one is very busy. It's hard to see. You'll see that there's some parts of it where the font is in a color that makes it difficult to see. So we're going to go ahead and cover the same information, but with an example of a way that it's easier for people to see. So, formatting and design tips. Okay, now I'm going to read aloud every single slide. Sorry, I can't see it because to you word for word until you all wish you'd just die. We've probably all been at presentations where the presenter is basically reading every slide aloud. And that can be really kind of frustrating. It makes it hard for you to feel engaged with the speaker. It isn't as interesting as a presentation where the person is speaking a little more extemporaneously. They're following the design of the slide and the information on the slide, but they're not just reading every single part of the slide word for word. So the goal is for you to connect with the audience members and to talk with them in a way where it pulls them in and gives them the sense that you really know that they're there as audience members. You want them to understand the work that you're doing. And it's much easier to do that if you're not reading every element of the slide. So the slides should guide your presentation, but they shouldn't be exactly word for word what you're saying. It's always better to keep it simple. The work that you've been doing is complex work. Research always is. And there's a lot of information that you're going to want to convey, but you have a very limited time to do it. And so you're going to want to really think about what it is that is the key message that you want the audience to walk away from. So when somebody is done listening to your talk, what information do you want them to know? What would be helpful for them to take away from the talk? Often using concise bullet points is a great way to do this. That gives the audience a general structure to follow and helps them kind of put things in order, but it's not so complex that they're having to decide between reading the slide and listening to you. You want them to be able to be listening to you, but then kind of give them some guideposts, and bullet points is a great way to do that. Minimal text usually is really helpful because, again, you don't want them to be so distracted by reading that they're not hearing what you're saying. Generally, if you use images, having 1 or 2 graphics per slide is a good way to go. That's about as much as makes sense to cover in an individual slide. Excuse me. And simple backgrounds is always the best. I know there's a lot of different options out there from a design standpoint, but sometimes having complex backgrounds, even though they're visually appealing, can be distracting and really takes away from the talk itself. One way to kind of control visibility and also help the audience stay on track with what it is that you're talking about is what's called animations. That's what you've seen me using here, that each item on the slide appears when I hit the next button. That way I know that you're paying attention to what's up there now. You're not trying to decide which part of the slide you should be looking at. It's just coming up as I am ready to talk about it. It's also important to be consistent in your slide design. So you want the font to be consistent across slides. You want the design to be consistent. You don't want the design and the visual aspect of your slides to take away from the content of what's on the slides and what it is that you're saying. So, have something that's visually appealing, but not overly crazy in terms of switching between fonts and switching between design elements and that sort of thing. For the font, you definitely want something that's easy to read. You want it to be a size 18 plus point. That gives you just a general guideline. And having contrasting colors. That one of those early slides that I showed that had all of the information on it had some writing that was in a blue color that against the white background was very difficult to see. Having contrasting colors like black lettering on a white background makes it much, much easier for your audience to see. Again, the goal is for the slides to help the audience and to be a guidepost, but not to take away from what it is that you're talking about. Don't be afraid to go big. Sometimes we feel like, oh, the slide has so much room on it. I should fit lots of information in, but you don't want to have the wording on the slide be so small that it's difficult for people to see. You really want each slide to just have a few key points on it. If you use charts, make sure that they're legible and include the legend with them so that somebody looking at the chart would be able to understand what it says, even if you don't walk them through it. You do want to walk them through it and point out the highlights, but you want all the labels there so that they can, if they don't hear you say part of what the chart represents, they'll be able to see it from the legends. Bigger font size always helps. It's also okay to split information across slides. Sometimes we feel that, oh, this slide is where I'm going to talk about this particular thing, and so everything about that particular thing has to fit on this slide. But often it's better to have multiple slides that all address the same issue. That way you don't have too much on any given slide, and it's okay if you have two slides that both address the same issue. Here's an example of a chart and a table. You can probably get a sense, and feel free to add in the chat. What do you all think of these two graphics? You can either unmute or put something in the chat. Do you feel like it's fairly easy to see what the purpose of these is?
We have a message that says hard to read. There's another response that says the font is a little bit small.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and those are both great points. For each of these, the information is there. It's helpful because there's lots of information there, but it's ironically almost harder to get any information because there's so much information. So the font is small. It's hard to know what to focus on. For instance, the table that lists the demographic characteristics of participants, there's so much there that it's hard to know, like, is this meaningful? Is this what you would expect? What should I be taking away from this? And possibly as a speaker, I could walk you through each little bit of it, but it's hard as an audience member to look at either of these and immediately know what the point is or what information is trying to be conveyed. Oops, somehow this is, okay. So when you have a graphic to put up, whether it's a table or a graph or anything else, it's always good to try to highlight the part that you want the audience to pay attention to. So this is part of the table that was on the previous slide. And you'll see that there's a red box around the part that I want you to pay attention to. So having that there visually makes it much easier for you as the audience member to look and see what it is that I want to have you focus on. And then I, as the presenter, would highlight that as well. So I would say something along the lines of, here's a table that shows the demographic characteristics of the participants in the study. I'd like you to pay particular attention to the difference between the education level. We had 33% who had a 4-year degree and 25% who had a master's degree. And again, having that red box around it makes it very easy for you to know where it is that I'm looking, what it is that I'm talking about. And the fact that I'm highlighting that means that that particular piece of information is going to be relevant to my presentation. That's going to be something that is meaningful for what I'm about to say. There's other pieces of information here that look like they could be very interesting, but especially for the short talks that you'll be giving, you're not going to be able to cover everything. So you want to really pick and choose what it is that you want your audience to focus on, and then make it easy for them to do that by designing the slide in a way where it's highlighted. Okay, so in general, organizing your presentation, you're going to want to start with an introduction. You'll introduce yourself. You'll say your name, maybe your major or your year in school. You'll also talk about the mentor. This mentions your summer research program. In this case, you'll be presenting at the Undergraduate Research Hub. So if you're Undergraduate Research Conference. If you're part of a research program, you can mention that. But many of you aren't. Many of you may be working independently with a mentor. So you definitely want to mention your mentor. If you're a part of a program like the Faculty Mentor Program, you should mention that. And you should give an indication of the title of your project. You should also talk about sponsoring or applicable departments, grants, classes, that sort of thing. Anyone who has supported your work, particularly financially, you want to mention that in the introduction. And then you want to transition into the introduction and background of research. The introduce yourself portion should be very brief, just a sentence or two. The introduction and background of research is where you'll talk a little bit more about the academic context. You'll talk about the significance of the research to the field and or to the larger world. You kind of want to give a sense of why this research is being done. You'll want to talk about the topic. You'll want to talk about previous literature. Typically, research builds on things that have been done. So you're likely working on a project that extends or expands research that's already been done. You want to talk a little bit about that research so that there's a context of this is what we already know and how we already know it. And then you transition to talking about, and this is what my project is looking at. This is the question that we have. This is the goal of this particular project. Laying it out that way helps the audience know kind of where the state of the field is and why your project is important. It gives them a sense of this is the question that needs to be answered, and that's why this project is taking place. And so it talks about why it's important. That went by very quickly, but I think you have a sense of it. So then moving on to the body of the presentation, the key content, you'll want to talk about the theoretical framework, the methods, the thesis and hypothesis, and the results. So the intro kind of touches on some of those things, but the intro is more of an overview of this is the broad picture. And then in the body, you start to talk more specifically about this particular project. So for this research project, I'm using the following theoretical model, if you are, or just setting up what's happening for this project. You'll want to talk about the methodology. You'll also want to talk about the general thesis or the hypotheses that you have, and often having a slide that explicitly lays out and said, here are the 2 hypotheses that we're testing, or this is the 1 hypothesis that we're testing. That really helps orient the audience to know, okay, this is what the purpose of this project is. And so this presentation should help me understand whether or not that hypothesis, what the answer to that hypothesis is. Was it supported or not? You'll also want to talk about results. And we'll talk in a moment about what to do if you don't yet have results or if the results don't fit with what you anticipate. The best way to organize your presentation might be different than the best way that your friend has to organize their presentation. And how much time you spend on each of these things that we mentioned might vary. So your project might be one where lots and lots of background information is particularly important, because that really sets the stage. Or your project might be one where just giving a very kind of brief overview of the state of the field is important, but then you really want to move on to focusing on the project at hand. So think about what makes sense for your presentation and then kind of use that to guide how much time you spend on each of the elements that we're talking about. Keep in mind that even if the past literature is important, the main purpose is for you to talk about your current research and current project. So the presentation really should be kind of telling the story of your research. What are the key concepts that you need to convey? So are there key terms or ideas that you need to define for the audience? What's the most important thing for people to know? When we talk about telling the story of your research, there may be some detours that you had to take. It might be something where you tried this one method and it didn't work, and then you had to try this other method, and then there was a hiccup with the IRB approval. All of those are part of the story, but they may not make it into the presentation. It kind of depends on, like let's say that you had a lot of issues and didn't even get to the point where you were able to collect the data that you anticipated. That might be something where that would be quite a bit of what you talk about in the presentation. But in general, when you give a presentation, you're going to be talking about the research itself and not necessarily spending too much time on detours, even if it was a detour that took you months to figure out. You also want to focus on transitioning between your ideas in a way that shows your logic. So you want to make it clear. You almost want it to be something where by the time you're done talking about the background work and the question at hand and the methodology, and when you get into your own specific project, it will make perfect sense to the audience. They're like, oh, I can see why he's testing it this way, or oh, I can see why she would choose these methods. That makes sense given everything that the speaker has already said. And then at the end, you'll want to have a conclusion. This will summarize your thesis and key points. If you had a slide that showed the hypotheses, sometimes it's helpful to show that again and then show underneath, like, and this is what we found. That ties it together nicely. It really helps the audience understand what the purpose of the study was and how those questions were answered. Reiterate the significance. Sometimes there's potential applications to the research that's being done. Sometimes there's consequences. A lot of times it's something where a research project actually just brings up additional questions to be asked, and that's completely fine. You can talk about those implications and future directions that you might want to take with your research. So again, talking about next steps, talking about questions that arose from this research or logical next steps that subsequent research would perhaps address. You also want to have an acknowledgement slide. You should acknowledge your mentors. If you're working with multiple people, make sure that you're referring to them appropriately given their title. So if they're a doctor, refer to them as doctor. If they're not, then don't use the term doctor. And if you're not sure, reach out and ask them. Acknowledge the program. Depending on which program you're in, they may have a logo for you to use to put on that slide. Acknowledge any funding that you might have. And then you also want to conclude with references. It's unlikely that you'll have the reference slide up long enough for people to really look through it thoroughly and kind of glean a lot of information, but it's nice to have it. And then if somebody asks you a question about one of your references, you can bring that slide back up and kind of point out where it is. And then be sure to thank the audience for their attention. Okay, so when you're presenting, As we mentioned, don't just read the slides, explain each slide, especially graphs, tables, and data. Take the time to walk people through it so it's easy for them to know what the highlights are. You want to spend about 1 minute per slide. That gives you a rough sense. There's some slides that are much easier to cover in less than a minute. Some might take a bit longer. Slow down. This, I think, is one of the biggest pieces of advice that we can offer, especially when you're nervous or excited, as you will be at the conference. The natural tendency is to speak faster. And you may not even realize that you're speaking as quickly as you are. And that just makes it harder for the audience's brains to keep up. Take a breath, slow down. If you find that you kind of have one of those moments where your brain suddenly shuts off and you pause, it's going to feel like an eternity to you. To the audience, it won't. It will, they may not even notice, even though you feel like, oh my gosh, I just stopped talking for 5 minutes. That's not what the experience is for the audience members. So just keep that in mind. If you find yourself kind of struggling for words, it's all okay. Be confident in sharing the work that you have done. One of the exciting things about doing research is getting to share it and know that you are the expert in the room. No one knows your project better than you do. Your mentor certainly is very familiar with it, but you're the one that knows the day-to-day work that you did. So just be confident in the fact that you have valuable information that your audience gets to hear, and they want to hear it. That's why they're there. Dress appropriately. That means business casual. It will be a long day, so make sure that you're not wearing shoes in particular that are uncomfortable, or some sort of outfit where you're going to constantly need to adjust it. You want it to be comfortable, but you also want it to look professional. So I wouldn't wear jeans or a t-shirt or anything along those lines. Use a clicker if that's something that helps you and works well for you. And be sure to present to the audience. You'll have a screen behind you, and it's very easy to kind of do this and present the whole time looking back that way. It's much more engaging for the audience if you can be looking at them and then occasionally look back at the screen. And then a few final tips. What if? If the project is not finished, the results are incomplete, the experiment failed, all of those have happened to students presenting at our conferences, and that's completely fine. If we knew exactly what the outcome of the research was going to be, we wouldn't do it. There'd be no point. So if any of these happen, present what you have using preliminary results. Hopefully you'll have some results that have come in, but maybe not many, or maybe none at all. And that's okay. It's okay to say, this project has taken longer than we anticipated. We don't have results yet, but you can talk about the anticipated results. You can say, this is what we think is going to happen. Or we have preliminary results. This is what the early analyses show. That's completely fine. If your results are not satisfactory or complete, sometimes you collect the data and then you realize, oh, we really should have collected this other thing and we didn't. Or we collected everything that we expected, but it actually isn't letting us answer the question in the way that we thought. That's okay. That's part of the process of learning to do research. So it's okay to talk about that as well. Or if you have results that just don't make sense, there's either no effects or the effects are all over the board or opposite of what you expected, that's also part of research, and that's fine. And it's okay to talk about that. This is a great time to talk about potential avenues for future work. So, we found that we have these really conflicting results and we think it might be due to such and such. So that's one thing that we want to work on next, is designing a study that would help us pull that apart. Focus on the context, the purpose, the goals, focus kind of on this big picture of what the study was designed to help you answer. I can guarantee you will not be the only one who's not finished. And if you don't know how to answer a question, if somebody asks a question, it's fine to say, oh, thank you for that question. I don't think the data that we have really answers that, but that would be something great to pursue in future work. It's also okay to kind of think out loud and say, well, the data that we have don't directly address that, but based on our research, and based on the previous research, I think that this is what I would think would be the answer to that. It's also okay to say, ooh, that's a really interesting question. Do you have thoughts on it? Because the audience member might be asking because they think, ooh, this could be what's going on. Um, Open the floor to input either from the person who's asking the question or to colleagues who are in the room. If your mentor is there or if there's a grad student or postdoc, it's okay to ask them and say, oh, Dr. Smith, do you have thoughts on this one? You're the one presenting. This is your project. So it's good to try to answer the question yourself, but it's also okay to share it with others. Again, if we already knew all the answers, we wouldn't be doing research. And typically every research project brings up additional. Above all, remember that the audience wants you to succeed. They are there because they are friends or they are family or they are part of your research team. All of those people are certainly cheering for you. Or they're there because there's something about your project that's of interest to them, or because there's another talk in the same panel the panels are kind of all related. So they're there because there's something about your presentation that's of interest to them. And they're excited and they want you to succeed and they want to learn more. So if somebody does ask a question and it seems like, well, what about this? Did you think about that? Take it for what it's worth. Don't feel defensive. Don't feel like, oh my gosh, this person thinks I did it wrong. They're probably just so excited to think about the work that you're doing that they're trying to think through the implications themselves. So take any audience questions, knowing that the goal is that they're enjoying your talk. They are thinking it through. They want to know more. And if there aren't many audience questions, that's fine too. Sometimes people really enjoy a presentation and they kind of want to ponder it a bit before some questions occur to them. So don't worry if there aren't a ton of really in-depth questions. A couple of helpful hints and reminders. Absolutely proofread your presentation multiple times. Have somebody else proofread it. Practice out loud in front of your mentor and colleagues. They will help with things like pronouncing certain terms that might be specific to your field. Also, record yourself presenting. That's where you find out about any little quirky habits that you might have, or ways that you constantly say or something like that. Don't let it discourage you or throw you off too much, but recording yourself does give you some insight in terms of, oh, I actually was speaking a lot faster than I thought I was. Time yourself. Dr. Tsaineri will go over the amount of time that you have, and those times will be adhered to pretty tightly. So it's really important that you design your talk in a way where you'll be able to fit it in to the time allocated. Again, the audience is rooting for you. They're excited. They love to hear undergraduates present their work. And with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Tsaineri, who's going to talk a little bit more specifically about the conference itself.
And if you don't mind, if you can please stay with the screen, I'm having some technical difficulties on my end for share screen. Thanks. All right. Hi, everybody. So URC is happening in just a little over 2 weeks. It's very exciting. April 18th on a Saturday at the Faculty Club. So next slide, please. It's happening. Hopefully you know where the Faculty Club is. It's kind of close to Sun God, if you know where that statue is, near Mandeville. And I believe it's technically in the Muir College geography of campus. We are expecting about 180 undergraduate presenters at URC this year. We are splitting it up into 5 different presentation sessions. And so that means we'll have 2 morning sessions and 3 afternoon sessions. And so those are the times that are displayed on the right-hand side that we will be having each of the sessions. There's a little bit of a break in between, 15 minutes in case you need to step away or walk between different rooms. And so we give you that time. There will be up to 10 concurrent panels during each session. And so there might be, a talk that's on robotics in one room. The next room might be on something regarding South Asian history. And so there's all different kinds of topics. For you, when you are assigned to your particular discussion panel, you are expected to be there for the entire 1 hour of your panel. You're there to give your talk, but you're also there to be an audience member for other people with a similar topic. And that way you can support each other, ask questions of each other, outside of the 1 hour that you are expected to be during presenting and being an audience member. You are an audience wandering around, listening to the other talks that are available throughout the day. And so you can go in and out between talks to individual rooms. We ask that you don't enter while someone is speaking. So maybe wait until you hear some applause right after they finish their talk to step into a room. But otherwise, you're welcome to visit and listen to talks all around all around the conference, to be able to listen to different topics, things that are similar to your field and things that are very different from your field. It's a great chance to explore and learn about what's available.
And
Next slide. Oh, go ahead.
just to be clear, each of you will be presenting during one of these sessions. It's not that you're going to give your talk multiple times at each of these sessions. So you may be assigned, for example, to morning session number 2. And then the other sessions are when you'll be an audience member for other talks.
Right. Thank you for that clarification. All right. So to break it down, the panels are organized around various topics and themes. As I gave you a little bit of an example earlier. And so within each discussion panel, there are 3 to 4 presentations. Now, that may not be that there's only 3 to 4 presenters, because some talks will have duos where there's 2 students co-presenting, and other talks may even have trios where there are 3 students co-presenting within a panel. But there will be 3 to 4 talks within each. So if you are a solo presenter just presenting by yourself for that talk, you have 12 minutes for your actual presentation. If you have a pair, that's 2 of you co-presenting, it will be 15 minutes for the 2 of you to share. And then if it's a trio, it is 17 minutes for the actual presentation talk that you're putting together. On top of that, for each one of the different levels, different types of presenters, you have 3 minutes for Q&A afterwards. So for individual presenters, the presentation is 12 minutes plus 3 minutes Q&A. For co-presenters of 2, it's 15 minutes plus 3 minutes of Q&A. And then for trios that are co-presenting, it's 17 minutes plus 3 minutes of Q&A. Next. So we recommend that you arrive about 15 minutes earlier to your entire 1-hour session. That way you get a chance to upload the presentation to the computer. We have machines available in every room for you to be able to do so. So we are not asking you to submit your presentation ahead of time. You just bring it to the conference the day of. If there's any reason that you feel you must use your machine, we can also swap out the machine for yours to be able to present. Maybe you have some particular video or some particular presentation type that is unique to your machine. And so if that's a situation, it makes sense that you can just swap out I believe they are HDMI cables, or they may have USB-C cables, depending on the room, to connect to your individual machine, if necessary. We recommend that you have multiple ways to access your presentation. That way, in case one fails, you have a backup and then a backup to the backup. And so you may have it on a flash drive, a USB drive. Those are the same thing. You may have it digitally online, which is what I think most people probably will have. And then you may also have it emailed to yourself, because maybe you can't access your online cloud situation, but if you have it by email, maybe you can download it real quick. And so we do recommend have at least those different ways to access your presentation, just in case Wi-Fi is not great that morning or you're having trouble just trying to access it your typical way. All right. And then, as I mentioned earlier, please try to enter and exit panels between presentations if you are, we're a little fast.
Sorry, I'm not sure what happened there. Let me see if I can
get back.
Yeah, give me just a moment, but you can go ahead and keep.
Yes. So yeah, please try to go in and out of rooms between presentations if you are an audience member, not during your 1-hour panel that you were assigned to, but if it's during one of the other times, wait until someone is done presenting before stepping out of the room, if at all possible. Oh, We
And I
almost
am
had it.
still having problems. Hold on just a moment.
Okay.
Um,
And I think the last bullet point on that slide was just to make sure that you stay in your session for the entirety of your panel. So if you were assigned to session number 2, which is 10:45 to 11:45, you are there during that entire time. And then aside from that, you can wander in and out to the various locations. All right, great. You got the same slide. Next slide, please. So for URC guests, you're welcome to invite your research team members. You can invite your family members. You can invite your friends. It is free for the public to come and listen to you talk. We would request that you have your guests register. So they can either register ahead of time or they can register on the day of at the reception area. If they are registering ahead of time and they register by tomorrow at noon, we can include them in the guest count for food. But if they register after tomorrow at noon, we cannot necessarily guarantee that we will have enough food available for your guests. And if they're just coming to listen to you talk and they don't intend to have breakfast or lunch with us, no problem. They can also mark that when they are registering, but we want to make sure that you are aware we have to submit a guest count to the faculty club by tomorrow. And so please encourage your guests to register ahead of time, if at all possible. There is no cost for them to register, and they can walk in if they want to the day of to register as well. We just ask that all guests either check in or register at the reception in the front of the faculty club as they come in before they go to your room to listen to you to talk. Now, as I mentioned, pre-registered guests are included in the total count for the food orders if they are in by tomorrow, April 3rd. So please encourage them to submit. And then a note is visitor parking and the scholars parking structure is what we recommend. This is under 6th College. That's the closest thing to the faculty club for the day of. There are alternate locations in Gilman parking structure as well as South parking structure. They're a little bit further away, but they are other places in case parking fills up. You can also consider Pangea. There is a charge for parking, so please note you will still have to pay for parking even on the weekends. For you yourself as a student, I believe you can use the student fee if you register with a student code, I believe, for Park Mobile. And then otherwise, your guests will probably pay the visitor parking rates, and they will need to park in visitor spots, even on the weekends. I think it is a bit cheaper, but it is still a charge on the weekends. And next slide. So we have a website. You've probably been there, but in case you haven't checked it out, it is urc.ucsd.edu. We will be posting information there that will include the schedule of the presentations, the presentation lineup. I mentioned in the chat that the presentation lineup is intending to be sent to you sometime later today, and that will tell you when you will be speaking and in what room you'll be speaking, and even who the moderator will be for your discussion panel. And so all of that information will be helpful for you to consider so you know when to tell your guests that you'll be speaking. And so we'll include that all of that information on our websites. But any additional updates that we have, the full program will be included there once we have that ready to go. If you have any questions, you're welcome to email ugresearch@ucsc.edu. That's the email that's been sending you all the information so far. And that's where we'll continue to have as a point of central response and receiving your questions for anything that you have questions regarding the conference. And I do see a private question to me, asking more about the presentation style. It asks if the presentations will be more like professional ones that you see like a PhD defense presentation. And then will the presenter view be available to the presenter to see the slide notes? And so we do try to have our machine set up to have presenter view set up. We tend to have it available on PowerPoint, which is what we are using, but it does depend on the mode of what you are saving your slides as. So if it's a PDF, it may look slightly different than if it's on PowerPoint or if it's on Google Slides or on Canvas slides. All those different things may have slightly different ways that they demonstrate presenter view. But so what I recommend is you familiarize yourself with how to adjust that and make sure that you know how to display your presenter view to yourself, but we will have the laptops ready so that they can have the display so that you can see your notes and it doesn't show it to the audience at the same time. But as always, have a backup just in case because you might have some technical difficulties. And so maybe it's also good to have a copy of your notes printed out with you in case you aren't able to access the presenter notes. But the style of the presentation, it is a professional one. This is a conference. We want you to have that experience to feel like you are presenting to an audience that has a general idea of what you're talking about. I'm not sure if the question is like, are you aiming at someone who is in your field versus a more general audience? So if you have more questions about that, please feel free to put that in the chat. But you're welcome to also include any other questions in the chat for whoever's in the room right now. Hopefully that answers your question.
And I've gotten a few questions directly. So just to reiterate, the recording of this presentation will be distributed to students who registered. So if you missed any parts of it or you want to watch it again, that will be available. And there was a question about oral presentations versus poster presentations. This conference is an oral presentation, so you'll be doing slides. And then there is another conference or symposium that will be taking place in May for students in specific programs like the Faculty Mentor Program and TRELS and some other programs, and that will be a poster presentation symposium. So for this presentation, for this conference, the one on April 18th, it's all oral presentations, no posters. For the one in May called Murals, that's all poster presentations, no slides or oral presentation. I mean, you'll still interact with people and we'll have another how to present session for murals. But just know that, yeah, for this one, it's all oral presentations. And I know Dr. Tsaineri talked a little bit about the audience. It's good to know that the people in you who will be in the audience for you, it's likely to be people who have some familiarity with your general area. Again, the panels are designed to be very, very loosely around a theme. So in some panels, that's very easy and the theme is fairly tightly knit and each of the talks will really fit well together. And in other instances, it's a little looser and it may not be quite as obvious how the links are. So you definitely want to make sure that you are explaining terms and jargon that you might be using. If there's typical phrases that are used in your research area, define those the first time you use it. It's often helpful to have a slide that shows what various abbreviations mean. Also know that there will be family and friends there who may have no research background or no interest or no previous exposure to the research that you're doing. So you want it to be general enough that it's easy for people to follow, but also know that there will be some people who are familiar with it in general. And I know that Dr. Tsaineri mentioned that outside of your own panel, when it's the other presentation slots, you're encouraged to go listen to other talks. And so you may be going to other talks that are really closely related to your own research. And you also may see a panel that's completely different from your major and your own research and anything you've ever thought of, but you might think, oh, that's kind of interesting. And so you might pop into that panel for a bit. So again, in the audience, there'll be a range in terms of people's familiarity with the particular topic.
Thank you for that. I think it was a very helpful idea of what to expect for the audience. So far, I don't see any additional questions, but you're welcome to continue typing them out or raising your hands. But also, if you are good, you can head out too, and we'll send a recording of this to, as Dr. Kung mentioned, to all registered student presenters for the conference to make sure that they have the information in this presentation. Otherwise, thanks for being here.